Hello and welcome to the program called Aging Matters. This program is sponsored by the Berks County Area Agency on Aging. My name is Ann Barlet and I'm the Public Advocacy and Outreach Manager for the agency. And welcome to our show this evening. Our title tonight is You Gotta Know Your Budget and How to Spend It. A little interesting for the program this evening, and I'd like to start with introducing our guest tonight is Janet Little. She is a registered dietitian and nutritionist and happens to be a nutrition consultant and works with our agency's program on the congregate meals for our seniors in Berks County. So welcome, Janet. Thanks for being with us. I'm excited to have the show tonight. I like our title that we came up with about you got to know your budget and how to spend it, and why we have a nutritionist. And what we thought about tonight's program is really about healthy eating. And if we know what we should eat and kind of budget that for the day, then how to spend it is how we eat it and what in our day's time. So budgeting and spending in terms of healthy eating and nutrition. So let's start and in our time that we have. What we talked about in preparation for the show was if we focused on some of the things that we were talking about are folks that we're seeing in statistics, not just Berks County, but we certainly know in Berks County that statistics are rising and showing us that more and more folks are becoming diabetic. And so we decided to focus on somebody who might be diabetic and knowing our budget as a diabetic, what to eat, and then how to do that through spending it throughout the day with what we eat. So it's seniors, particularly living with diabetes. So the basics we got to get out of the way first, Janet, is I understand we know that there are two types of diabetes. So tell us what that is.
Well, basically, diabetes itself is a chronic illness, a chronic condition where the body is unable to take blood glucose, the sugar in your blood, and bring it into the cell, the mitochondria of the cell, to burn it up for energy. And everyone's body does this, but with diabetes, it's just not working as well as it should. There isn't the ability to just eat and let your body take over and do that. So the two types of diabetes are, with type 1, it's where somebody with type 1 does not have the hormone insulin, which you don't produce enough of it or at all to bring the blood glucose into the cell to therefore be processed into energy. Type 2 used to be called adult onset diabetes, and I'll come back to that point, but that's where you do have insulin, but it's not enough, your body doesn't create enough, or as fast as it should. So the things that maybe you and I, or people who don't have diabetes, don't even think about, when you do have diabetes, you have to be aware of, which of the two do you have, and what it means, and how you have to handle it.
Okay, so we got a lot even in that first thing of the two types of diabetes, and you mentioned a lot of different words. You talked about, I heard insulin in there, and I heard the cells in the bloodstream and that kind of thing. So since we kind of know type 1 and then type 2, tell us slowly for us to absorb, because I think it's difficult. I think it's one of the harder things, at least for me, to understand what happens in our body, the system, how it works, or in the case with the diabetic, may not work or work slowly, as you said. So go over that in detail.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to back up a little bit to do that. And the thing to remember, number one, is much of the food we eat gets changed into glucose, which is blood sugar, which goes into our blood.
That gets changed, okay?
Yeah, and not everything, and we'll go into that, but it's mainly carbohydrates. So, and these are wonderful foods that are in a wide variety that after you eat them and digest them and absorb them as glucose, they go into your blood, and then the next task for your body is to bring that glucose into your cell to be burned up for energy.
Okay.
And you need oxygen for that. So for the blood glucose or sugar to get into your cell, from your bloodstream into the cell, it needs the hormone insulin to do that. And there's a lot of that in biochemistry of the body. There's a lot of, well, to go from here to here, you need this. You need some sort of carrier, like a bus or a car. So that's the carrier for glucose, is to have enough insulin at the right time to move it into the cell. So combined with oxygen, the process yields energy. Now
And we can function
function. Like we need glucose just for your brain to function. We need 100 grams of it a day, just for your brain. So you need additional blood glucose for everything else we do. And you don't need it all at once, you need it throughout the day. And that's where we'll get into that kind of thing. That's how integral with this is, because we need the glucose for energy. And and I did mention how glucose must enter the cells. Insulin itself, it doesn't come out of nowhere. It's not something you take, it's something your body makes. And it's a hormone produced by the pancreas. A small gland located below and behind the stomach. So, there's a lot in there, and one of those items is the pancreas. So it needs to be functioning in order to create the insulin. It's secreted out into your bloodstream. There's a lot going on in the bloodstream.
So, in going back to then the type 1 and the type 2, so we can all eat. So that doesn't matter. And I can eat carbs for whether I have type 1 or type 2. But if it's understanding correctly, so if I happen to be a type 1 diabetic, that, from what I'm understanding, that, I'm eating and the carbs are trying to maneuver through my body, and to get it into the cells, I need that insulin.
Right.
So in type 1, is it true or not true that I either don't have that insulin or very slow, not enough?
You don't have it. You don't have it, and that's why children tend to be diagnosed with it. It may not start when you're a baby, but sometime during your childhood, very often, very young. Or there's something that really, if you're an adult, something really catastrophic happens to you, where you just don't have it.
So I need to get it.
You have to get it.
I have to have it in order for this system to work, and that's why we have people who take insulin.
That's right.
Okay.
So if you don't make it yourself, you've got to get it. Absolutely, you have to get it.
And if we're type 2, and probably older, and we've been eating longer and more and maybe not as good. So it may require that in order for, again, that whole process to work and for that to get into the cells, you said, and to give us that energy, we're producing typically some insulin. But maybe not enough.
Not enough, and slowly.
Okay.
It may be slow. See, what happens when you do eat is particularly carbohydrates is after it's chewed and swallowed and digested and absorbed, it's in your bloodstream as glucose. So in the case of type 1, and you find out the hard way, the glucose goes through the bloodstream and does not enter the cell at all, because there's no insulin, and it builds up. It builds up. It gets high, and all that blood sugar damages your body. And over time, and in both cases, high blood sugar is going to damage your body. What happens is it damages the sides, the walls of your capillaries and veins, and this waste products build up behind your eyes. That's why people with diabetes over time go blind, because there's waste products. So, and part of the waste products too is your body says, okay, where is it? I better start breaking down my body. So it starts breaking down your own muscle to be used for energy, to be used for glucose. And you get more of something that can't enter the cell. So it's often children, young children who get sick, or they become faint, and their blood sugar, they test their blood sugar at sky high, and then they realize what's going on. You get thirsty because you have all these waste products and glucose build up in your blood. You get thirsty, and then of course you have to use the restroom a lot. So you have what we call polydipsia, polyuria. And it's a shame, because you just have this buildup. The brain knows it's not in the cells, but it can't do much more than that.
So we can't really get rid of it?
It builds up, and
not enough to get rid of it. I mean, it builds up.
Well, what happens is it builds up and damages your body, but also the kidneys become overloaded, because when you have that polyuria and you have to go to the restroom, your kidneys are working double time.
Okay, so we could be vision issues or blindness, the kidney issues. We also are certainly I'm aware of folks that have had amputations, whether it's a toe, foot, leg, whatever, because it sounds like, again, it's building up and destroying parts of your body.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
And with the, I mean, it takes time to develop that, but boy, it happens.
Okay.
Now, with the adult onset, the type 2, what happens is, as you mentioned, there's not enough insulin, and it's slow. And what happens for all of us is when we eat, when we're really hungry, our blood sugar is a little bit low. Okay, you have to have some blood sugar in your body because, as you said, you need it for everything, all those body processes. But when you eat, your blood sugar goes up. Okay. Well, not immediately, but as soon as it enters your blood, as soon as it digests and it's absorbed, and you have blood glucose in your blood, the level goes high. That's normal.
Okay.
As the insulin is secreted in response to that and moves the blood sugar into the cells, the level reduces over time, not right away, but it takes time. That's normal.
And then hence our balance.
Our balance.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay.
And sometimes, like when I've counseled people as an outpatient dietitian or an inpatient dietitian, people say, I thought I wasn't supposed to have any sugar in my blood. So no, you need the normal level. You need some.
So let's talk about, before we move on to what that is, tell me again, you explained very nicely the high and the low. So people who either are high or low, whether they faint or whatever, is it because that either they went so long without eating, they ate too much of the wrong thing that, again, spikes or decreases that blood sugar?
It's if you eat healthy, you're going to have a spike in blood sugar. If you don't eat healthy, you're going to have a spike in blood sugar. It's just normal.
Okay.
It's just normal. It's the way it works.
Okay.
What is?
But how do we get it in balance?
Well, what we get in balance is we have to get that insulin. But so you either have your own that's acting slow or no, and if not, then you have to get that insulin. But in terms of what's going into your body, this is where for diabetes, the best practice is to first and foremost work on or develop a pattern, develop a plan for what you're eating. So, of course, with type 1 and in some cases type 2, you're going to need insulin. Well, you're going to need insulin for the type 1. You're going to need some sort of medication, perhaps, for the type 2. And in worst cases, or inevitably in some cases, you're going to need your insulin. But no matter what you end up doing pharmaceutically, you need to first and foremost work or develop a eating pattern and look at what you're eating so you don't have too much at once.
Okay, so you mentioned carbohydrates, but you also said the sugars. So explain to us then the foods that we eat. We all talk about eating a variety of foods.
Right.
And for today's program, we're not really going to talk about the vegetables. We know we should eat good vegetables and throughout our day and necessarily proteins and fats. But all of those items make up a healthy, well-balanced meal plan. But we wanted to talk about carbohydrates and explain why in relationship to diabetes do we talk about carbohydrates, and then we'll get into what are carbs and so on.
Well, carbs, carbohydrate, protein, and fat are 3 macronutrients that give you energy. So that whole process that I described with carbs also is true of protein and fat.
Okay.
Except fat doesn't use oxygen. The protein and the carbs do. Carbohydrates do. Why carbohydrates are the star when you start looking at diabetes is that's the macronutrient that generates the most blood glucose, blood sugar. Okay, so it's carbohydrate that once they're digested and absorbed, it's absorbed as glucose, and it goes in your blood, and you can refer to it as blood glucose or blood sugar. Some people say, "Oh, I have sugar." Yeah, what they usually mean is I have too much, and I can't. I need help. I need a process to help modify that and keep it normal, enable my body to clear it and bring it into the cells so it can create, the cell can create energy. Now, you mentioned vegetables, and what's good about carbohydrates, so a lot of people don't think that, is carbohydrates are everywhere.
And we need to know what carbohydrates, what is a carbohydrate?
Well, carbohydrates they come in different forms, and basically, very easily, no matter what they are, they break down into glucose.
Okay.
So let's pretend
we don't want too much, but we want enough.
We want enough.
Okay.
We want enough, and that's the tricky thing. And how you know, you're sitting at home here, like, well, how much? You keep talking about this. It's best to go to a healthcare professional that knows how to do this, and that would be a registered dietitian, because we're the only healthcare profession that studies solely food and nutrition as it relates to health. So yes, you would still be directed by your doctor, your endocrinologist, but the person that's going to sit down with you and develop your own pattern and plan and teach you all of this is going to be an RD.
In a sense, our budget and how we can spend it through the day.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about what is a carb. So I'll let you go through all you have some great food models here. So carbohydrate is a word out here. And you mentioned sugars, and so we have heard many times, obviously people with diabetes will say, I can't eat sugar, I can't eat. So why are we talking carbs? What are carbs? How many carbs, if we're looking for a day's plan, what are those? And show us, that will help us, I think, to learn a little bit more.
That's a big laundry list. That's a lot for me to do.
We don't have a great deal of time.
No, okay, real quickly. Carbohydrates, again, they're made up of carbon atoms, and they're put together in such a way that they break apart very easily. And they break apart in your cell, and they become energy. And you mentioned, you hear the word sugars. It used to be, until about the mid-90s, a person with diabetes could not have sugar. And then they realized, by sugar, they meant table sugar, but let's pretend I don't have one, but let's pretend this is orange sugar, and this is like a tablespoon of sugar, and it dawned on them with research that...
maybe if you can hold that up, I don't know if we can see it.
Let's pretend this is a tablespoon of sugar. So it's like, oh, can't have that, because after all, we're trying to regulate our blood glucose, or blood sugar, so it kind of made sense to everybody. Let's just not eat it.
Right.
But then it dawned on them that table sugar is nothing more than carbohydrate. It's just a simple form of it.
Okay.
It's a simple form of it. It's broken, it becomes energy very quickly. So if you were to eat this, it's absorbed by the body, it goes into the cell, well, it goes into the body, into the blood, and it rises very quickly because it's very easy to absorb.
Okay.
And that's why if you're diabetic and all of a sudden your blood sugar crashes, they'll give you some orange juice. Now what happens is, or a piece of candy, you always carry that with you as emergency. Now what happens is people think, oh, if I drink this when my blood sugar is low, it's almost medicinal, that means I shouldn't drink this. Not so. So again, so you have your table sugar, you have your fruit, you have your fruit juice, you have your starch. This is a combination. Before it becomes glucose, it's mannose, and it breaks down, becomes glucose. And here's milk, lactose, and many vegetables have some carbohydrate in them. Even like your broccolis and your I know you're thinking of healthy vegetables, they have some carbohydrates too. They aren't a big source, but they have them. You can count that. And then your cereals, I mentioned fruit. And what happens is when you sit down with a dietitian, what they do is they look at your medical chart, but they also they do a nutrient analysis, nutrition assessment actually, and they develop your pattern. That's based on your age, your sex, your weight,
what it should be.
What it should be, and very often, where is it? Where do you want to go? The good news, and I'm so glad you mentioned that. The really good news is, let's say you're overweight. Let's say you're above the normal range. You don't have to get down to your normal weight within the normal range in order to regulate your own diabetes, your own blood sugar. You can often just losing some is enough to see a nice response, and often just starting to follow a pattern and choosing wisely.
So going back to this, so these are all
servings
of carbohydrates.
Yeah, they're forms of carbohydrate.
Okay.
So in other words, another way of putting this
yeah, go ahead.
is it's not protein, it's not like meat, and it's not fat. It's everything else.
Okay.
And some foods are
balance this. So we're saying I need to know what I can have of this in my budget or in my day.
Yeah.
Balancing my day, so I'm not doing this in my blood sugars, so I have a good day. And want to spend it by saying I'm going to have this and this in the morning and something else in the day.
What you base that on is your pattern.
Yes. Okay.
And very standard is 3 to 4 servings of carbohydrate for breakfast, lunch, and maybe 4, an additional serving of carbohydrate for dinner, and then a couple of snacks. So it's like spacing your meals out. You always want to have some protein, by the way, to fight reducing your muscle mass too, by the way. So let's say this is breakfast, and I go, oh, what's 4? Well, here's 1.
Yep.
And that's 15 grams of carbohydrate, and that's why we have specific servings, so you don't have to think and add and subtract. If you're told, what was that, 4, and 5, that's 8, that's 13 servings of carbohydrate.
So we're talking servings, and we have to know then what makes a serving. So
and
this
each
is
serving
an example
is 15
of
grams.
A juice serving size.
Absolutely. So let's say you go, oh, I want to have an egg, which is not a carb, but that will make you want to have a piece of toast. Okay? So there's 1, 2, and then you might want to have a little cereal.
Wow.
There's a teeny
and that looks
tiny.
like a lot to me for breakfast.
That's because people think they have to cut them out. And if you know what you're doing, if you have your pattern and you learn what these serving sizes are, you don't have to add things up. So you go, okay, well, this is 3 actually. Now, you might want to have a little bit of milk or a lot of milk. So that's where you have maybe some additional carbohydrate. Milk is interesting because there's protein in it as well. A lot of protein in it. It's very good. So that's breakfast. Lunch is very similar. You might say, oh, I want a sandwich. Well, there's 2 pieces. And let's say you go, okay, here's my 3. This is a true piece of bread with an ounce piece of bread. And this is 15 grams of carbohydrate, and so is this. This is 8 ounces of milk. Whether it's whole milk.
So then in portion sizes, we're talking 1, 2, 3.
3, that's right.
So that's what you told us. You want at least that 3 and maybe 4, right?
Typically
whether it's that
3.
meal or a snack.
Well, when you get to snacks, usually they're like 2 carbohydrates, 1 carbohydrate serving. So that's where you get into your crackers with peanut butter. A piece of fruit with some peanut butter, or just a piece of fruit. I shouldn't say just, but a piece of fruit, because that'll be like 1 serving of carbohydrate. Okay.
So really, so far, even just looking at this for breakfast and lunch looks more than I normally have. Believe it or not.
I believe it. What a lot of people will say is that's a lot of food, because what happens is when you eat healthy, when you start eating something that's not full of sugars that are added to it or fats, it does look like a lot of volume. And that's a very interesting point, and it'll fill you up. And you won't want to eat as much.
Okay.
Plus, it's going to be, I always say that it's going to be hitting your blood sugar nicely. Some of these things will digest faster and absorb faster, become blood sugar faster, and get into that cell first. This might be second, especially if it's whole grain, takes a little bit longer to digest. So it's really good to have that in one meal, so it hits the blood sugar over a little bit, not all at once, a longer period of time. As opposed to a chocolate bar, which is all at once.
That's pretty much the original sugar example of this, right?
Yeah.
So that this going in fast, so it's something like the chocolate bar, which is probably why they tried to say originally.
Well, that's right.
That out.
Remember how I said you could have sugar? Well, this is how that would work. Well, here's a serving of carbohydrate. Well, here's another one. That's your sugar. And if you wanted to, you could use real sugar and put that on there. If you know what you're doing, if you measure it out. Now you might say, wow, what about the no-calorie foods? What about the calorie-reduced foods, carbohydrate-reduced? Well, they're very helpful. And you could use your regular sugar replacement, sugar sweetener, and you wouldn't have to spend your carbohydrate serving on that.
Okay.
Another thing too, like instead of getting a piece of pie, you could get half a piece of pie. And it used to be, no, had to be diet, or you couldn't have it. You just have a smaller piece. And that's how that can work. And you know something, some people don't like that. They go, I'm an all or nothing type person. I won't have any sugar. Because you have to do, as long as you also have to plan a little bit more. But if you really want that piece of pie, you could have half, depending on what's in there.
Well, I think that we have to plan, as you said.
Yeah.
Looking ahead, looking at what it is after I see a nutritionist, a dietitian who is a good educator, for some of us who don't quite get it all the time, to sit down and figure out what is it in what is it right for me to put in that pattern, to put in that budget. And then know how to spend that over that day, so that maybe I don't like this particular carb, but this size portion is one, so I have to think portion, and it might be, as you said, that one piece of bread that I might want instead. And that's okay to put that where I need to get it in the day's time.
Sure, that's it.
And then I think the complications come in when I always call them combination foods, like a lasagna.
Oh yeah.
Something where I can't say how many noodles. What's the size of this square that I just cut? And I think that will come with folks learning and being able to ask those questions and be able to talk to a professional such as yourself.
Absolutely. Materials.
That's important because these are in a way it sounds very simple. And in a way, it sounds very complicated. So I would suggest, and I'm sure you would too, that it is a system we can understand. It helps us by being diabetic or not. And it's also, is it not good for somebody who is not diabetic? It's helping any of us make good, healthy choices to keep that in line, because we know now that you said it affects a lot of body systems. So I guess in our wrap-up, we're needing to sign off, but in our wrap-up, I assume you would agree with me that for somebody, whether you're diabetic or not, and want to eat a more healthy way, that one of the good things would be to look at portion sizes, to know your servings, how to balance it, how to spend your budget for that day, and to talk to a registered dietitian.
Yes, that's it.
Good. Well, again, we've run out of time, and we could cover so much more in tonight's program. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next month.